Hello everyone and welcome to another Game of Thrones Tower of Babel breakdown for Season 5, Episode 10, Mother's Mercy, the final episode of the season, and boy was it a doozy. What a cheerful way to go out, just really leaves you high, just really happy that you watched, 10 episodes of this really great show, and I'm just really excited to talk about it, Is that not the feeling that everyone else is having?
I am actually excited to talk about it. It's not exactly a happy ending, but...
No, I'm not. I'm kidding. I'm not happy about it at all. I'm actually really pissed off about it. Let's start off. Before we jump into the episode, I just want to touch on something. We got an email from Michael, and he was talking about my criticism of the hand-slapping scene with the sand snakes last week. So I'll just read that to you guys and see what you think. So it says, "Hey guys, great show. I believe the reason for the hand-slapping scene was to show that the younger girl, Tyene, knows how to get into people's heads and mess with them successfully. She's already played with Bronn and got him to say what she wanted at least twice. And here she is, egging her sister into making a rare mistake. They're developing her more than her sisters for sure, which means she'll play a larger part to come. My fingers are crossed for Tyene and Bronn to get a retirement castle from Jaime. Thanks, go Team Stark," which is a great way to end, although in retrospect, maybe not as awesome.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? I mean, I'm still, even after this week's episode, I'm still that scene with the hand slapping is still got going nothing for it for me, at least.
there have been a few seasons this season that we've sort of said that about, and then they've paid off later on. So this isn't going to pay off this season, maybe next season. I agree with him that they are developing her more than either of her sisters, and that has to be for a reason. And I have my theories about where the Sand Snakes are going to go after this.
Are they book-based theories or show-based theories?
Well, it's kind of both at this point, right? Like the show has caught up to the books. There's a couple like minor storylines that haven't like fully progressed, but like all the big stuff has happened. You know what I mean? So it's basically any theory from now on is kind of both.
Okay, so I guess I'll leave it to your discretion to decide whether or not it's cool to voice those theories or not, but we'll see. I like where Michael's going with this. I like that. Yeah, he's obviously right about the developing Tyene. Later in this episode, we get a scene with Poison that redeems that scene with Bronn and the Sand Snakes earlier.
Exactly,
where that was a wasted scene, and then it became something later. But as of now, the hand slapping scene is if it's nothing but character building for Tyene, I still think it's not really worth it.
Well, the thing with these scenes is they are paying off within the same season. This one's not going to pay off for at least a year, right?
Yeah.
So
which
it might not have the same
remember
effect.
It probably. Yeah.
And maybe not even pay off, but it's just like another piece of her character.
Yeah. And again, if that's all it is, not worth it. So let's get into the episode here because there's a lot to unbox. So we'll start at Stannis' camp, and hey, there's melting snow. All intents and for all we know, that it seems like what the sacrifice worked, right? Like Shireen's dead, but hey, the snow's melting, so good signs. That's awesome, but not so fast, okay? Because half the men deserted overnight. They took all the horses. Followed up by the fact that Selyse, Stannis' wife, hanged herself overnight. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, Melisandre hightails it out of there, is heading towards Castle Black. So Stannis is pretty much screwed. Just absolutely, there's really nothing left for him there. He's got like a ragtag group of people with him, barely anything. What else? He seems like Melisandre has abandoned him. I'll ask you why you think that is in a bit. The wife thing kind of makes sense. The men abandoning him makes sense to me. Like after you see, like your king burn his own daughter, like, and these are his men. It's like they're out of here. There's no reason to stick around. Like who knows what this crazy person will do. What do you think Melisandre took off?
That one's it's hard to say. I suppose she sees that her plan has failed, that she doesn't see Stannis in the same light anymore. So, again, this is kind of like a theme with Melisandre. She's misinterpreted her visions, And so she jumped ship as well.
Well, I want to know what kind of vision she got with her walking on the battlements of Winterfell.
Well, maybe that's still to come.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe she took it to like literally for like right now, right? Maybe, yeah. Maybe it's still coming later. I don't know. Yeah. In the book, she's never left Castle Black, right?
Yes.
As I understand. So she's never even there in the first place. So that's interesting. I guess it leaves open for people to speculate. I think that they changed that a little bit, but we'll get to that later. That's for another discussion altogether. So we'll move on to Sam and Jon, and they're sitting in Castle Black, and we get a nice little scene of them hanging out together. Pretty much the last scene of them hanging out together, which in retrospect, taking it with the episode taken as a whole, is like
very
pretty
sad.
melancholy. Yeah, it's like a pretty sad scene. Not when you're first watching it doesn't appear that way, but if you rewatch it, definitely does come off that way. So Sam tells
at least they
Jon
get to say goodbye.
Yeah, exactly, and they have nice cheers and they get a real goodbye, which very few characters on this show ever get. Sam tells Jon that he and Gilly will for sure die if he stays at Castle Black, which you can't help but to think would totally be true. He has a nice little monologue about not wanting to be a failure for Gilly and Sam Jr., which I thought was pretty sad, especially considering what like the whole being to a pulp a couple weeks ago thing happening. So he thinks he should be sent to the Citadel to become a maester. So where is this? So we talked about this. It's somewhere in...
They haven't really mentioned it too much in the show. It's in Old Town, which is far south. It's pretty much the furthest southwest in Westeros.
Okay, so and this is something that Sam would really want because A, it's got a big library and we know he likes to read. And he feels like he can actually help by doing that. Although I do have to criticize this scene a little bit by saying that like he makes it out to seem like hey, he's just gonna go. It'll take like a week for him to become a maester, and then he'll be back.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a years long.
Yeah, no,
process.
it's going to college. It's a long process for sure. But it does make sense for Sam's character. Like his greatest strength have been his intellect and his ability to interpret information. Like he reads and brings new information to the table. Right? He's not a fighter. He's gotten lucky a couple times, but it's not going to last. So in the novels, it's Jon's idea to send him, not Sam's idea, which I like more, but whatever.
You like it as Jon's idea more?
For sure.
I don't know, because with Sam making the suggestion, because first of all, in the show situation, Jon knows that Sam's like his only, like one of the last few people he has left on his side, right? At the castle. So he probably wouldn't want to see him go, because then he has almost no one backing him anymore. Not that Sam backing him is huge, but at least it's something, right? And he's a friend. But with Sam making the suggestion, it's like it's a necessity, it's something that has to be done, and he agrees reluctantly to let it happen. And you kind of see the last of Jon's like friends abandon him right before everything comes to an end, right? So I kind of like it better this way, which is funny because you're the book reader and I'm the show watcher. It only makes sense.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about this scene other than it's super sad in retrospect?
Very sad. I don't know. I'm excited to see more from Sam. I'm excited to see Old Town. I'm assuming we'll see it next season.
You think we'll stick with Sam while he's learning to be a maester? Like,
yeah, because there's more important. There's other things happening around him while he's in Old Town.
Okay,
it's not just
he already left for Old Town in the books. Like this is
yeah. So in the novels he leaves. Yeah, well, Jon sends him with Maester Aemon away, and Aemon dies along the way. I don't know. Do people care about book spoilers? I guess I should mention that.
No, I don't think so. I mean, the books are out. The books have been out for years. It's not like it's and they're dealing with things that have already happened in the show. So I would, as long as it's stuff that's already happened, then it's different.
We don't spend a ton of time with Sam in Old Town, but he does reach Old Town in book 5, and there's some new characters and some new ways of looking at new perspectives that are pretty interesting. So I'm excited to see that.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, I guess it's a spoiler to say that he made it, but I guess that's not that big of a spoiler anyway.
Yeah, we'll deal with it.
Okay, sorry. Anyway, let's move on. So Brienne, her and Pod have been apparently just been hanging out, looking for the signal from Winterfell for weeks, apparently. And now this is where the show does something that pisses me off. This is like a classic television show, like, trope. And they do a couple of these in this episode that kind of bug me. So you set up this plot device about the candle in the window, which creates all this drama, which is fine. But we barely see Brienne the whole time. Ever since she mentions it to that one guy in the inn, we barely see her after that, right?
You see her one other time and she's just looking at the window, and that's it.
Yeah. And then, so you have all this work, and then and then even in this episode, you set twice, you do a setup where she's going to light the candle, and both times, well, the first time it doesn't work, this time she does, but then you do it where she turns around moments, like seconds before she lights the candle, is like, it's like not even, like, it feels cheap, you know? Like, if you're gonna do that, like, have her not even be there, which is, I think that would even work better. Like, she already left, it's like, not just, she didn't just turn around and miss it, which is like, again, just feels too convenient for me. I don't know. What do you feel about that?
They for sure have done that a few times this season, just in terms of, like, and the show in general. Like, you have this gripe that you often mention about how characters, there's a huge world and they happen to be in the same place, same time, sort of thing.
Yeah, it always has that same problem.
Some of those things you have to forgive, but this is, again, it was building this all season, and everything that happened in Winterfell, for the record, was fairly anticlimactic, right? Like, you didn't even see the battle, which they had been building up this entire season.
You did some of it, at least, right? I mean, how much it's not really a battle, it was more of a slaughter, so really, do you need to see that, you know?
Yeah. I don't know, I wanted more from it, though. Or from any of that.
Yeah, this is your big gripe for the season, was the Winterfell stuff, I guess, eh?
This entire season, well, especially because it didn't pay off. This is episode 10, and it didn't pay off. For me.
It did in some degrees, but yeah, I would say I'd have to mostly agree that it was pretty much a disappointment, but there's definitely bigger ones, for sure. And I'm looking at you, Dorne, all right? But we'll get to you later. So the reason Brienne had turned around at such a convenient moment was because Podrick had spotted Stannis marching to Winterfell. Obviously, Brienne has like a loaded interest in Stannis, as she was the one who saw, and this is how she always puts it, a shadow with Stannis' face on it.
With the face of Stannis Baratheon, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, that she forsakes her vows to Catelyn and Jaime and decides to go for her personal vendetta.
Yeah, so much for her sword being named Oathkeeper, right? Anyway, so she takes off and manages to catch Stannis right at the end of the battle. So we kind of skipped ahead a bit, but Stannis eventually reaches Winterfell. He's going to start his siege, which it just looks like you can hardly call his army an army. It's like just a random group. He walked there, for God's sakes. You know?
Yeah.
And like, how are you going to siege anything with, you don't have any food, and you don't have any horses, and you don't have any, like, you know, like, it's kind of like, I think at that point he's kind of just resigned to, well, this is what I have to do, so whether I know it's not going to work or not, I'm just going to have to do it. But as soon as he starts to set up, you know, it's like, out of Winterfell just pours all these, like, an actual army of, and they're
the cavalry all on horseback.
Yeah, people on horses, which is like, there's just no way. There's like just, and then as soon as that happens, you get this great overhead shot. Very much reminds me of season 10, episode 10 last season, where you get that overhead shot of the horses and the wildlings, but of these horses like encircling them, like half his men just trying to run and get away. Obviously, it doesn't work out well. It cuts away. You're disappointed. What did you want to see here that you didn't get to see, Dan?
Well, I wanted to see more of a confrontation between, like, Stannis and Roose or Ramsay. I didn't expect Roose Bolton. He's too smart to be out there in the field. Ramsay for sure, especially because I mean, I'll mention that this hasn't happened in the books. The battle for Winterfell has not happened yet in the books. That's been bumped to the sixth book. So, like, I had no idea how it was going to play out. So I just had higher expectations in general. I also thought Stannis was going to win, because sacrificing Shireen should have more effect than just melting snow. Yeah, I thought if, you know, he like, whatever, he bangs Melisandre, and then that creates a shadow demon that goes and kills Renly Baratheon, right? So burning his own daughter should have more substance than that. You know what I mean? Or significance.
I guess, the whole demon thing is still kind of like an annoyance for most. I think for a lot of people, it's like in this world where you can just create shadow demons whenever you want. Apparently,
But it's not whenever you want. That's why.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this. The rules aren't clear on the whole magic thing. So, what you're saying about like sacrificing Shireen to like win that battle, like or whatever, it should have more significance. I think what happens here is that nothing happened, and that either Melisandre's abilities or have diminished, or that Shireen didn't have as much significance, at least for this whatever this god ability thing is, or whatever. I think that's the reason she took off. She knew nothing, it didn't work, and then was like,
or Melisandre didn't use whatever power she gained from that in this because she left, right? So she abandoned him. So if you assume that sacrificing Shireen endowed her with some sort of power, maybe she didn't use it.
I'm skeptical of that, and I'll mention. I'll kind of skip ahead a bit.
This is just like wishful thinking.
But like, okay, so I don't think when she does that, she like gets a power boost and then gets to decide what she uses it on. I think it kind of like she does it, and then whatever that's going to happen happens. If you know what I mean. That makes sense. It's like she doesn't necessarily control directly the results, but she knows that.
That's definitely the way it feels.
Yeah.
It's been very nondescript this entire time.
And back to the problem where the rules aren't very clear on this whole thing, which is an annoyance. So when you mentioned that maybe she didn't use the power, whatever she got, one thing that stuck out to me, and it was a pretty small thing, I don't know if anyone really picked up on it, or if you picked up on it, was when, and I'll kind of jump forward here for a second, was when she arrives at Castle Black. It's a very short scene. She arrives at Castle Black, she's on horseback, which I don't know where she got the horse from, but she's on horseback, and she's bundled up, like fully clothed with like for the weather because it's cold. But the rest of the time we've seen her in the north, she's just been dressed like she's always has because she said something about the power of the one god or whatever keeps her warm.
The power of Roller protects her, like keeps her warm. Yeah.
So it just seems like that's a pretty big difference to me, and maybe that has maybe I'm reading into it too much, which is something we've done before, but that to me was kind of a sign like maybe she's actually lost her touch.
So she's just like a dude in the world now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, she's not a dude, but
you know what I
mean. So yeah, that's my take on that. Anything else you want to mention about? I guess we can mention that Brienne catches up with Stannis right after he does the cool, like he kills two of Bolton like soldiers. They're pretty cool, like mini fight scene. I thought you don't think of Stannis as like a fighter in that way.
Yeah, but and also when you get that overhead shot, you don't think about this battle playing out that way.
Yeah,
that's
true. You think it's more like just a slaughter.
Well, they're in an open field and a bunch of dudes on horses, and then at the end it's like these two random guys are just here away from the rest of their army, and Stannis takes them out. I don't know. It's for dramatic effect, and it was cool, but Stannis was also at I had a bunch of people over to watch the show, and this was kind of the consensus afterwards, was like, he was at the front. He was one of the first people to die. There's no way he survives, everybody else is dead, and he ends up in the woods somewhere,
Well, I mean, maybe he had people protect him, and then he tried to escape to the woods, and then...
I guess he could have killed someone and taken their horse or something, but Stannis also wouldn't have retreated, right? Like,
because the way he pulls that sword at, like, when he sees the cavalry coming, it's kind of like... He was kind of resigned to the fact he was going to lose anyway, but he was going to go down with a fight, I think. Although he eventually doesn't. So he ends up in the woods, right? Takes on these two guys. He gets his foot cut or something. His leg, it's bleeding.
Yeah.
He's kind of like, he's done. There's nothing left. He would have been found by someone eventually, right? So he turned...
And probably flayed slowly.
Yeah, probably. We get a nice line where before it cuts to Brienne, where he's like, "Oh, the Boltons have women fighting for him now," and then you're like, "Oh shit!" And then it cuts to Brienne. She gets to make her little like victory speech. Then it's again, you feel kind of bad for Stannis. I think. I mean, even after what he did last week, you still kind of feel bad. At least I did. The way he kind of like resigns himself to just being like, do your duty, get it over with. The way he admits to using black magic to kill his brother. Like, you can't help but to feel like maybe he regrets a lot of these things at that moment.
Well, yeah, because none of it paid off the way Melisandre promised it would, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's the first major death in this episode. Stannis, it's an actor I liked. I always thought, even though he was it was really dour and down. I think it just did a really good job of portraying that downness, if that makes sense.
It's like Stephen Delane or something like that, or Stephen Delane.
So, yeah, I'm not familiar with all the
No, he did a
actors'
great
names
job.
all the time.
Also, again, I know this is wishful thinking, but he died off screen. She just swung a sword and then it cut away. It
Was
doesn't.
there not a scream?
No, there was no scream. It was just like she screamed as she swung,
Yeah,
and then it
was
cut
there no
away.
Was there no sound of the sword hitting anything?
You see, like maybe he's still alive. Maybe she decided to spare him, but I just can't see why she would.
Yeah, no, that makes no sense, really. I don't. Why would you go through all that trouble to not kill him? I mean, maybe she had like a last moment, like moment of consciousness or whatever.
Maybe she realized that he could still be useful in some other, capacity. This is also being very meta, but like, as a show, like the cutting away doesn't necessarily mean that he's not dead. Like, if he's a bad guy and he's Ramsay Bolton, if and when Ramsay dies, you need to see it and you need to enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
Just like when Joffrey died, you needed to see like the pain in his eyes and all that crap, right? Because you hate these characters. Stannis isn't one of those characters. Even after burning Shireen, I don't think people purely hate him, and he didn't like need his comeuppance. So maybe he just died off screen, and that's that. It was just a weird way to shoot it.
I agree, because all the other deaths in this episode alone are not hidden in any way, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It definitely is interesting to look at that, and that's just one of those things. They open themselves up to criticism and to speculation when they kill people off screen. Is really what it is.
But again, one of the people that was at my house watching the show made a good point. Like, they killed Ned Stark off screen.
No, I mean
they cut away right at the end, and then the next episode they revealed that he's for real dead. Nothing happened in between.
That's true. At the same time, I was actually, funny you bring that up. I read an interview with the showrunners DB Weiss and Stephen Weiss.
No,
and David Benioff.
David Benioff, yeah.
Yeah, and they were talking about like that exact scene about whether they're in relation to what happens later in the episode. They're talking about the scene with Ned and how they had the longest discussion on whether they should cut on. Like, they were trying to decide whether they should cut on frame 7 or frame 8 or frame 9, and they couldn't decide. They ended up deciding on that they had to see the blade enter the neck, but they weren't going to have him like it all the way, so they couldn't decide exactly where to do it because they didn't want to leave any speculation that he was dead.
Well, I mean, then they didn't. I remember when watching season 1, I remember thinking like, something happened. Somebody intervened, he's still alive, there's no way.
Well, no, because so it cuts away a little, like, early enough, I guess, to make it, but then...
Well, no, you're right, it's as the sword is coming down.
Yeah, but, like, from a distance, like, from Arya's perspective, like, way out in the crowd, don't you see, like, the head rolling, or, like...
No, that's again the next episode. Arya's perspective is, like, the sword swings, and it cuts away to her, and she's just looking straight up, and she sees doves flying. Because what's his name? Yoren is not letting her see, right? He's forcing her to hide her eyes.
Yeah. I guess it's been a while since I've seen episode 9 of season 1. So, but anyway, we'll get back to that interview. They have some other interesting things that they say about what happens later. Anything else you want to mention about everything with Stannis? I mean, we can kind of talk about the fallout of this, because we're not going to be able to really chat about it until next year. The fallout here is with Stannis losing, the Boltons take another victory in this. Like, that's the second king of the 5 kings that they've killed alone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not technically alone, but like they played a hand in killing 2 of the major ones, right? That actually only leaves one, Balon Greyjoy, who we haven't seen for 2 seasons. Although, as far as I understand, we'll be seeing him next year.
Yeah, it kind of sucks that he's the winner of the War of 5 Kings without having done anything.
Well, I mean, winner in what way, right?
He's the last surviving. You could argue that the Baratheons or / Lannisters win because Tommen's sitting the throne, but
yeah, that would where my argument would land.
Yes, but I mean, that to be fair, Joffrey started the war on the throne, so he didn't really do anything.
Yeah, that's true. So what's this leave? Okay, so taking the Sansa stuff out of it, you have the Boltons at Winterfell, and no one to challenge them anymore. Okay, so that's
Well, I
bad.
mean, if the Ironborn are back next season, then the Ironborn might, because they are
Maybe.
also in the north.
Are they? I guess. I mean, we haven't heard anything about that for 2 seasons, so we don't know what they are.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it works. Okay, so at the beginning of the War of Five Kings, they did do a decent amount of damage in the north before the Boltons came back or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I think at this point, Asha, who's Yara in the show, is at Deepwood Motte probably, which is whatever. It's another castle in the north, but they're very much on the western side of the north towards the shore. Like they've been, diminished.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, last time we saw them was with Theon's sister riding off or sailing off on that boat. And she kind of had that like look of like I'll be back, but like we hadn't seen her for 3 weeks, but because we haven't seen her for 2 seasons, it's kind of that whole scene's kind of diminished as well. So I guess that leaves, it leaves two powers, I guess, kind of in the north. Mostly the Boltons are in control here.
Yes.
And they'll probably kind of rule with an iron fist for however long they will. I mean, with no one to really take them on except for the Greyjoys, it's looks pretty bleak.
Well, no, it's the other northern houses that they need to worry about. They have no real control over the other northern houses. Their end game was the marriage to Sansa, right? If they had a Stark heir, then the other northern houses would bow the knee.
Right. So, I guess I can't take the Sansa stuff out of it.
So now
let's get to that.
Getting into the Sansa stuff. That was a segue.
Yeah. Nice. Using, so you always need to point out my All right, I always have to point out my segues, and you criticize me for doing it, and now you did it for once because you have to do it, otherwise no one will notice, right?
You don't know that. Whatever. You didn't notice. That's why I had to point it out. If you had noticed, we would have just gone. Whatever. Bickering. Come on.
Okay. Using the battle with Stannis as a distraction, Sansa uses the stolen corkscrew that she took a couple episodes ago to like unlock her door and escape her room. So, and then there's another show trope thing that bugs me a lot. This one shouldn't bug me so much, but it does. She opens the door with the corkscrew and then drops it on the floor. Leaves it. Why would you do that? It's like
doesn't need it anymore.
Okay.
You know what's more annoying is when that happens in a video game where you can't control it. Like if you use some sort of dagger or something to unlock a door and then they drop it and you still want that weapon.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things. It's like, what are you thinking? Like, why? Like, you don't have any weapons. At least that was something. Anything. Why? Maybe you need to unlock another door. Like why? Why would you? I don't know. That it shouldn't bug you as much, but it's just one of those things. It's like, remember when Sam killed that White Walker that one time, and then we just thought he just left the dagger on the ground. Remember that? Turns out he took it with him, but we didn't know that for like 2 seasons. It's just it's small things that it's like, and even cut to it like. Even if you don't mention it again, right? Like, she opens the door with the corkscrew, that's it. But, like, why show her drop it on the floor? I don't know.
Yeah, have her walk off screen with it, and then it's gone.
So I thought when she got to the tower, there'd be, like, another twist, right? Like, she would get up to the tower, and she'd have, like, someone waiting for her. Like, a guard had been posted there so that she couldn't do that or whatever, right? But no, she's able to light the candle. She looks out and sees, like, the whole battle about to happen. And then, so here's the thing. This is kind of weird. We criticized the whole like Brienne turning her back on the candle thing, right? Even if she'd seen the candle, okay, let's say she had seen the candle, the stuff with Sansa, I feel like would have happened in the exact same way anyway.
That's what I was saying at the beginning. It was a dumb plan. What is she gonna do? She sees a candle in a window. She's gonna scale the walls, and like on her own get Sansa out of there. Do it in the first place, then.
I guess I don't know. I guess that was what her plan was. But so she lights the candle in like maybe 10 minutes later, tops maybe. I mean, I guess the whole battle happens right before she's in the tower the whole time. I guess maybe she's waiting. If she'd seen it, maybe she would have been able to use that time to scale the wall. Who knows? But it doesn't happen. So she's like trying to get her, I guess, back to her room before she gets caught. And as she turns around a corner on one of the battlements, she runs into Miranda, which is the kettle Master's daughter.
The Kennel Master's daughter.
Episodes. Yeah. We saw a couple seasons or episodes ago. She's
the girl with the hip bones.
Yes, exactly. And she has a bow, and they kind of get like a standoff. Also, yeah, Theon's there too, so that's important to mention. And Sansa, and again, like this is another like person resigning herself to like just kill me, like, which is actually a pretty big deal. I don't think that's not something that people do lightly. I don't think, right? She just admits like she just kill me now, so I don't have to end up like either of you crazy people.
So that's just how bad Ramsay is, right? Like she would rather die than spend another day around him.
And it's glossed over pretty quick because it moves on to something else very quickly. But I think that's a pretty major thing to acknowledge, anyway, at least. So Miranda has other plans, apparently. She's going to, like, torture her, some sort of, like, maiming of some kind, shoot her in the arm. I'm not really sure what her plan here is, actually, to be honest.
I think just incapacitate her and then let Ramsay torture her for as long as he wants.
Okay, so that seems... Okay, yeah, it along those lines. Either way, that's kind of what we figured. It's just unsettling. So, at the last second, Theon gets his, like, and this is what James Hibbard from the EW called it. I really liked it, so I'm stealing it here. He reached his Vader-like point and throws her off the wall. And if you look at it, it's very like
no, that makes the most sense for sure.
No, and then lifts like tries to just lift her up over his head and throws him in off the wall. The only thing that's more satisfying is that there's a splat at the bottom, like she falls and it's like a splat of blood. And then like things started getting like okay, shit, they're coming back. We need to get out of here. They're running around, don't know what to do. And then they decide their plan is to
jump off the wall.
Which is weird because we just saw
after they just threw the girl off the wall.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what their plan is here. I guess the snow maybe they're hoping will break their fall.
Yeah, I think that's the idea.
But it's been melting.
The other thing, the snow should have been a little bit higher because that was still a huge jump, and that's not how snow works.
Well, I mean, snow does work that way. Actually, you can jump off pretty high. You can jump off.
It would need to be a lot of snow.
Yeah, I mean, and it's all about like your technique. Is like how would you land? Maybe like you want to be able to have as much snow absorb the fall as possible. Like you wouldn't want to jump in like you would like feet first, right? You'd want to kind of almost land like trying to absorb as much of the impact as possible, right? I don't know. I'm not sure what the logistics of snow diving are, but
in the books, a similar thing happens. Obviously, it's not Sansa because she's not there yet, or ever. But the snow. They mentioned the snow is like more than like halfway up the wall. It's huge, so it's not that much of a jump. So it's much more believable.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like, and then the way they cut here is like they just like literally they're in midair, which is like, again, that's pretty cheap as well. Like you're gonna leave us for a year with them like literally suspended in midair. So that's annoying to me. I mean, I don't know how it's going to play out next year. You can't imagine they're just going to land and everything's going to be fine. You know, I feel like someone's leg's going to be broken or both of their legs are broken. I wonder, like, my wondering is like, I don't think you do this whole Theon redemption thing if they're just going to be caught again by Ramsay, right? If they jump off the wall, you think that it's most likely you think that they're gonna like survive. At least one of them will, and be able to actually escape. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe James Hibbard again from the EW, who brought up the thought that Brienne is really close by. Maybe she'll see the light in the thing, and then maybe they'll be like she'll be there close enough. She's close enough that maybe she'll be able to help in some way.
I guess, yeah.
But that's unclear. The plan here is a little sketchy, but like they didn't really have much choice, right? Like they literally had moments to just make a decision. So, I mean, again, I don't think if you're gonna cut midair, if the first scene next season is they pick up midair and then and they just fall to their death, like that doesn't make sense.
No,
right?
For sure. I'm pretty sure they'll be okay. It's just a weird way to cut it, but that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't like ending on cliffhangers like that. That's a huge one, actually.
I mean, what did I say, Dan? This episode would have more traditional cliffhangers than any of the previous seasons.
Doesn't mean I have to like it.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I predicted it. So Anything else you want to mention about anything happening in Winterfell? I mean, you already mentioned that you felt like it was a bit of a disappointment. But anything else?
Like overall, I still really like this episode overall, but that is for sure the weak point for me, or for this season rather. Is the weak point is the Winterfell stuff, which should have been bigger. They had the capacity to be bigger.
Well, I guess we should mention more about like the Theon thing, right? I mean, it's been seasons in the making, I guess now, where we really didn't like Theon at one. We liked him enough at one point. I mean, he was just like the ward, right? He was just kind of around.
He was kind of a douche back then.
Yeah, but he wasn't even around really. He was kind of a minor character in the first season, right? Then second season things kind of pick up a bit more. We really don't like him by the end of that season. Third season even less so, but then we had to deal with him getting tortured. Didn't really enjoy that very much. Fourth season it's like we're like, he's not even the same character really anymore. Do you still hold a grudge for what he did to those farm boys? Yes and no, but you still kind of feel more bad for him than you do then.
It gets to the point that it's like, yeah, he's done bad, but he's paid for it, and I don't want to see any more bad happen to him.
Right. So and at the beginning of this season, we kind of start the arc towards the redemption side of things with the return of Sansa, right? So it took the entire season, but we got there. Do you think it was done effectively? Do you think it was properly paid off? Did it happen too soon?
I think they did a decent job with that. I didn't like a lot of we talked about this in previous podcasts about like the very controversial scenes with Sansa and Theon, but I think they did a good job in that it didn't come out like he didn't automatically just become a hero. He just lashed out. It was just an emotional reaction, and then he's like, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that, and then they had to figure out a plan.
Yeah. So
he hasn't been redeemed yet. It's just that he's started along that path. He's been thinking about it for a while, probably judging by his the confliction on his face, and now he's finally acted.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, yes, it's the first step on the road to redemption,
yes.
I guess. But the fact that he's done something at all is a pretty big step, I'd say. I think it's a well paid off. It's earned, I think. Just based off of what we've seen this whole season with the return of Sansa. I mean, Alfie Allen's has done a pretty good job with the performance by making it pretty clear that he is conflicted. His face, even though he's still doing the twitchiness and stuff, you kind of can still see that there's a bit of Theon in there still, and there is confliction, even though he's done things that have really screwed over Sansa a couple times, right? You got to think that moment, the moments that led up to it, the big ones obviously being when he was there to marry off Sansa and was named Theon again. That was probably a big moment that led to this. The things that he saw, remember that I guess they grew up together, right? So he has that part of it as well. So the things that he saw with Ramsay and Sansa must have torn on him as well. And the part where he betrayed her. So those are all the moments that lead up to it. So I think overall, I think it works.
Right.
I think there'll be a lot of people out there who are kind of that's too obvious. This is it's too it's too simple. Obviously that's going to happen. And was what happened with Sansa on screen worth this moment? People will argue yes and no. I'm kind of on the fence about whether I mean, I've backpedaled a lot since my first comments about that whole thing, but whether that need to happen or not, I think what happens here, based on that stuff, is at least makes it a little bit more worthwhile. You know what I mean?
I feel like what happened here would have been just as good without the rape scene, or without the proto rape scene.
Yeah.
But again, we don't need to get into that. It's happened. It's done. Don't have to like it. Whatever.
Yeah, so let's, on that happy note, let's continue the happiness and move to Bravos. And I just want to mention before we start here that we totally called it, in pretty much all aspects of this whole story, except for the ending part of it. So Arya disguises herself as a young prostitute to get herself close enough to Myrcella Trant to get her revenge. And I think she's even using the mask of that same girl that died of cancer. I think cancer, which I think I even called as well last week. So
yeah,
I'm not positive, but I'm 95% sure. I haven't gone back and compared them, but it would make theatrical sense, for them to do it that way. And so anyway, the scene itself, she's disguised, whatever. She takes off the mask, and it's a pretty brutal death scene. This is the second major death, although
for sure
you wouldn't say has been a major character for, a minor character for seasons, but it's a major death for Arya to commit it, the murder anyway. Stabs him in both eyes, which I think might have something to do with what happens later, but I'm not sure. Stabs him in both eyes and then in the chest a bunch of times. And then she does this weird thing, another classic movie television trope. I did a couple of these that are cliche, where she asks him questions but he has no ability to answer because he has something stuck in his mouth. That's how many times have you seen that in a movie? You're like, I can't hear you. It's of course you can't hear them. You stuffed something in their fucking mouth. How the hell are they supposed to answer your goddamn questions? That one again, it doesn't bug me as much. I think it's just more. That's just funny that they use that cliche.
Mm-hmm. She's more just letting it all out at that point. She doesn't really even want the answers.
Yeah, right? So she calls herself Arya Stark, murders the shit out of him, gets back, puts back the mask, and then she has this smug look on her face when she does it too, right before she gets caught. And we're again, we called it. There's no way that Jaqen's not going to know what you did, right? Or that you lied to him. So Jaqen and the girl that's been kind of riding her ass this whole season are told you she wasn't ready. She's look what she did. And then Jaqen confronts her about hey, you killed the wrong person. He didn't deserve to die, although we would maybe disagree.
It's not about deserving or not deserving. He wasn't meant to die.
Yeah, okay. So and then the line is, death must be paid with life, which is weird because he kills himself, which is, so is it death be paid with a life? You have to take another person's life? So the rule is if someone dies that's not supposed to die, someone else has to die, which seems like an odd rule.
It does, because in theory that person wasn't also supposed to die.
Yeah, so it just creates a chain of this.
I don't know. The way to look at it is you kill someone who wasn't meant to die yet, so it creates a void, and that void has to be filled with someone else's life.
Okay, but to me that means there's someone something should be born, not killed. But I mean, I'm just nitpicking here.
Well, that's the way it worked with Daenerys and stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
So, the last part, I'm not quite sure what's going on. Maybe you have a better idea. So, Jaqen kills himself. Arya's upset because she's I think she lost another friend. And then the girl's well, you thought he was your friend. Blah, blah, blah. She turns around. It's not the girl anymore. It's Jaqen again. You're what's going on? She turns back to the other guy, and starts pulling faces off of him. And it's just face after face after face, which is super, first of all, it's ghost faces too. It's not even kind of when she put it back, it looked like a.
It looked like just a Mission Impossible mask, right?
Yeah, and then instead when she's pulling them off, it's literally they're wisping off into nothingness as she's pulling them off. And then we have another Star Wars-esque moment here where she gets to another face, and it's her face on this other person's body, which is very much like the Luke seeing his face in the Vader mask on Dagobah. I don't know if they did this intentionally, but that's two very distinct Star Wars moments, right?
I mean, I doubt they did it intentionally to be Star Wars. But...
maybe. I mean, even Arya's face on the other guy's face has that same dumb look of fakeness on it that Luke's face had in the Vader mask, but whatever. So Arya goes blind. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm missing something here. I'm not following it exactly. Is there something I'm missing? Is there a moment? Is there a line of dialogue that I maybe missed or something? Why is she going blind here? Do you know?
The way I interpret it is, okay, first of all, I don't think it's because she stabbed Maren Chan's eyes. That's whatever. But I think it's basically because she used the mask when she wasn't ready.
Oh.
So that's the way I interpret it. So the mask to her was just a mask, but to the faceless men, they can use them at any time. I guess that's what I always kind of assume reading the books, that there's an element of magic to the faceless men. They're not literally just putting on a mask and going out and killing someone, right? Because that's too that's too grounded and easy. So there's an element of magic to it. So I guess the idea of becoming a faceless man, once you're finally ready, is that you lose your own face and you don't have your own face. You have to every day you're spending in another person's face. You lose your own identity, right? You just work for the faceless god, the god of death, whatever, right? So I'm assuming she used the mask too early and it made her go blind. So we'll see what happens. This happens again. This happens in the novels, but in a different fashion. I thought he was going to feed her that liquid, and then that would make her go blind, because she does drink something and then go to sleep and wakes up and can't see. But whatever, I like the way they did this. Yeah. The faces looked a little goofy, especially when the waif has Jaqen's head on her little body.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Yeah, the way they did it was like Daredevil, kind of like the way she like looked up and then like the face like that starts going like fading away. Mm-hmm. Very much, almost exactly like they did the blind scene in Daredevil. But yeah, I don't know. I think there was a sign. I'm not sure, but there was a line maybe about how the mask is poison to those who aren't initiated or whatever. But I'm not sure. So I was a little confused. But if that does make sense, that I'm glad someone made sense of that for me.
Also, here I just thought of this now. The other way to think about it is, it's another step on her becoming a faceless man. She's losing Arya's eyes, so she has no one's eyes, right? She has to become no one. So she's losing that piece of Arya, because she sees the world through those eyes, and she sees Meryn Trant as her enemy when he's not her enemy anymore, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's actually the coolest way of looking at it. That didn't even occur to me. I like that. I mean, I kind of thought that after my thought was that after she went blind here, her ability to be a faceless murderer assassin would be like diminished. Like, how do you do that if you can't see? So I mean, I didn't think that maybe you put on another one person's face, you may be able to use their eyes. It's definitely interesting. So
I don't know either. It's just speculation,
but I like that. I like that idea. I gotta mention though that I'm really not that upset about this whole fate thing. Like, I wasn't really that like, oh shit, Arya's blind now. Like, because like I said before in this about this whole storyline, is that ever since she reached Braavos, everything she's been doing this season, even killing Meryn Trant, feels so detached from the rest of the story overall, that it doesn't really feel like that much of a major loss of any kind to the major story, right?
Yeah. Not yet. I feel like Arya eventually, she's going to have a huge role to play at some point.
Well, you'd hope so, right? But I've lost all hope in that there being any.
That's true too. Like I'm at the point now. Like, Daenerys could just die somewhere in Essos and no one would know, in Westeros, and like that could be the way he decides to write it, and then fuck, right?
Yeah. Like, at this point, it's like literally, it's like there's no hope for anyone. We might as well just give up now and just agree that the show is just too depressing to watch and just move on. But I guess we won't for now. We'll talk about Dorne, which yay. So we're in Dorne, and aren't we glad that this Dornish storyline is finally coming to an end? Like, to be honest here, like, finally,
you are,
right? I am. I mean, I don't. Did you enjoy Dorne this season?
I enjoyed pieces of Dorne. Doran Martell was awesome. I liked a little bit of the interplay. I liked seeing the Sand Snakes. I wanted a bit more out of them, but like, they're still minor characters at this point. I don't know how much that's going to pay off, if it ever does. There's definitely a lot missing out of the Dornish storyline. It's focusing mostly on Jaime and Bronn, which, whatever, give Bronn more screen time.
Yeah. I'm always a fan of giving Bronn more screen time. Always. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I just feel like this whole thing just felt so like. I mean, it ends on an interesting note, which I like, but it felt like a lot of work to get to this one moment that actually feels like it actually paid off. You know. Mm-hmm. What we've been. This is like an inciting moment that can cause other things, right? But everything that's happened so far has been very boring, to be honest. Dorne, we've barely seen any of it. We've seen one beach, and then we saw the Water Gardens, which is a lovely place, like a really cool set. But it's just not, you want more. Like, you don't have. There's no sense of like what the Dornish people are actually like. There's no sense of like what Dorne as a place is actually like, unless it's just a giant desert.
Well, a lot of it
So
is, but yeah, you're right. They didn't really focus. They didn't even go to Sunspear, right? That's why in the opening credits it just says Dorne. It doesn't even say a city because they haven't really. They've been to the Water Gardens and that's about it.
yeah, I don't know. Let's just get. Like, why don't we just get to the point where like things get good, and then we can and then we can speculate on what's actually going to happen. So this scene is actually pretty quick, where Jamie and the Dornish are, they're saying their goodbyes. Tristan and Myrcella get out on the ship after what's her name, Alaria. After Alaria gives her like a kiss on the lips, and even then you're kind of like, that's weird. That's a weird.
It was a little weird because it's not like a common thing to happen anywhere other point in the series, even for the Dornish.
Yeah, so you're like, okay, but you're like, okay, well, maybe she. Who knows? At that point, I don't think anyone was predicting.
No, 100%. Like, again, I had a bunch of people over, and a couple of the girls were like, "Oh, it's poison." And my girlfriend actually said it's like that Batman movie, and I got really mad at her because that's the worst Batman movie. But
Batman and Robin.
Yeah, that was the first thing that she thought of when she saw that kiss.
If only she was wearing wax lips. Hey,
Yeah.
what a terrible movie. Oh, and your least favorite actress, I think, too, Uma Thurman.
Uma Thurman, yeah.
So wait, they actually did predict it? I did not. I didn't see that coming, but
Yeah, a few people did.
So they get on the boat. Bronn gets a goodbye from that other Tyene, one of the only developed sand snake, and I thought it's just another funny, like, it's just another comedic relief moment, which I think is important for that moment, for that scene. They get on the boat and they get maybe like half a mile offshore, and Jamie has nice conversation with Myrcella. He's like, we're like, oh, he's finally gonna tell her what, that he's her father, and she's kind of getting there, and he's like, she kind of stops him and says, you don't have to say, I already know, and I'm okay with it, and I'm happy about it, which is weird because she had that last scene where she stomped out of the room, like, you don't know me at all, but I guess that's how teenagers are, right?
For sure.
Just kind of like,
and they missed an opportunity for another Star Wars moment there, just so you know.
Why? What could they have used?
The Myrcella, I am your father, and then she'd be like, no,
no,
and then she'd die.
I think that would be a little bit on
it would
the
have been a
nose,
bit much, yeah.
And he even does the voice. He's like, what are you doing? No, it's good. Stop saying it like that. Anyway, so the nose starts to bleed, and you're like, oh shit, this isn't good. He's like, Myrcella. So here's what I think happens on the boat after she dies. Okay, I think Bronn comes down, figures out what he's like. Oh, I know this. This is like classic sand snake's poison symptoms. I know he knows full well what's going on there. My question here is, beyond the fact that I think it was a really nice scene that Jamie had with his daughter right before they died, which classic Game of Thrones, always give a nice father-daughter scene before you kill the daughter. But this is where the story actually, this is what I mentioned, this is where the story actually gets interesting. So they are on the boat. They have Tristan, right? Or Tristane, however they call it. And now with Myrcella dead, Tristane now becomes a bargaining chip in the same way Myrcella was to the Dorne, or to Alaria when Oberyn died, right? So unless the whole ship is maybe she has paid off the dudes on the ship, they're going to kill Bronn and Jamie too. I'm not sure. It seems unlikely. But what's Alaria's plan in the long run? Was it just pure revenge? Because if that's the case, she really fucked up. She's gonna die now for sure, because we all know how King Doran believes in what he thinks about third chances, right? Last episode, we know, he's gonna find out. There's no denying that, right?
Yeah.
And not only did she put Tristane in danger by doing that, she also put her whole kingdom, or her whole kingdom in danger. I guess not the kingdom, her country in danger by essentially inciting a war.
For sure, this is an act of war, and for sure she did it purely out of vengeance. There's no larger game here for her, I don't think. That was revenge for Oberyn's death. It was revenge against a Lannister. I mean, I'm sure she's kind of thought it through. She's probably not going to go back to Doran and tell her what she did. I'm sure her and the Sand Snakes will go into hiding, or maybe even try to get to King's Landing and cause more havoc. But it was for sure vengeance.
Yeah. Okay. So the other Sand Snakes were obviously in on this, I guess.
It seems like it. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. It just seems like it seems really. I guess the Dornish are impulsive people, but it just seems really impulsive and not fully thought out here.
That has been her character this entire time, though. She kind of acts out of emotion rather than on reason.
Yeah, so I guess she gets what she wants. She got to kill Myrcella, which she's been trying to do all season. The fallout from this, I think, will be interesting. I think really that's what we have to look forward to. I think Doran is smart enough to know what happened here. I mean, he's going to know that Alaria was...
But I don't know what he can do about it at this point. It's out of his hands.
Yeah, is he gonna say, okay, let's do it, let's war it out over what this stupid girl did, killing, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, obviously he's not gonna just let Trystane get killed, but he doesn't have much control over that either, because now he's in their custody, right? My question is, what does Jaime do? Because he can't really just somewhat return to King's Landing with a dead Myrcella to come to Cersei. That's not gonna work, especially with what happens with Cersei this week. That's just not gonna pay off. Does maybe Jaime not return to King's Landing, if I was him, I wouldn't. I'd be like, you just avoid the whole thing.
Well, where else is he gonna go?
There's nothing left for you there, and just kind of back the hell out, and just maybe ask them to sail to Essos,
or just go back to Castle Rock, I guess. But I don't know. I see Jaime going back to King's Landing and trying to find a solution here. But yeah, I said right away as soon as this happened, I'm like, that's war. That's an act of war. Also hasn't happened in the books. It was unexpected, but that's the end. There's no relationship between the Lannisters and the Martells anymore. There can't be.
And you just mentioned the one last thing. I mentioned this earlier, but the scene with Bronn and the Sand Snakes in the dungeon where Bronn is poisoned is paid off here, because then you instantly know what's happening.
Yeah.
You don't have to waste exposition on explaining that she's poisoned, and then with Alaria taking the antidote, you kind of instantly
because it would have been ridiculous if that just happened and then she swigged this bottle and then she's all fine.
Yeah. So, and that's good. I'm glad that they redeemed that, but I mean, I'm still not happy about the hand slapping scene. So, sorry, Mike. I know you wrote in about your theory, but I'm not yet convinced. So
I was fine with that scene. It's not that bad.
Okay, well, at least you have someone on your side. Marine. So all of Daenerys's cabinet, I'm going to call them her cabinet, are just kind of lost. They're literally just sitting there like lost puppies on the stairs. On the bright side, none of them died when she abandoned them in the middle of the Colosseum. So that's a plus. And Grey Worm is back.
I don't know how much control she had over that. It wasn't her abandoning them so much as Drogon leaving. Was she going to let go of
midair? She didn't have to get on the back of the dragon either.
I guess.
So they decide, Jorah and Tyrion have a little spat, because obviously Jorah's still pissed off that he kind of betrayed him. Although at the same time, how really upset can you be? You did kidnap him, so I think they're even. So the two, Jorah and what's his name? Dario, they decide they're going to go look for Dany, right? Okay, that makes sense. They're the only two that are really equipped to do that, because Grey Worm is injured. And then the decision is that Tyrion and Grey Worm are going to stay behind to rule Marine while they're away.
And Missandei.
Yeah, and Missandei as well. It was helpful. So that's not actually, as plans go, not the worst, actually.
Yes, except Tyrion's pretty new for all of them to trust him this much.
Yeah,
to
but we know
give
he's
them the
pretty
city.
Smart too.
Yeah. It's a weird thing. They're like, yeah, well, you can just have the city while we go. And he was there, he got there, a couple weeks ago?
Well, yeah, that's why you leave Grey Worm, right? I think that's the idea in their head, anyway. So, yeah, it does seem a little, rushed. The whole thing with Tyrion, looking back at it, is a bit quick. The way he's quickly accepted into the inner fold, the inner circle, and then is, pretty much right away accepted as one of them, is a little rushed, and maybe would have a little bit more nuance there would have been a little nice. But at the same time, we get to have these kinds of scenes, so it's worth
tough
it.
to say, because Yes, I've said this a lot this entire season. If everything feels very rushed, they're getting to the big parts of the stories. Mind you, the stuff that they're skipping over in the books, a lot of it's fairly monotonous, right? It doesn't work for TV. You can't have a scene with Sansa at the Eyrie for an entire season, or Tyrion just in a slave camp somewhere, and like some people get sick and he's just a slave for a while,
Yeah.
So I understand why they're skipping over it. It inherently makes it feel very rushed.
Well, I as far as I understand, they're making some of these changes, like you said, for story reasons. What I understand is about the book is that Tyrion almost meets Dany, and then doesn't, which I think is dumb. It's like, don't tease that kind of stuff over and over, and it's just like, just do it already. Like, so the fact that you skip that whole thing and you get to it is good.
Well, I think George Martin himself said it's going to happen in the sixth book that they are going to meet. I think.
Well, you'd hope so.
or he alluded to. He probably didn't say it outright, but he alluded to it. But yeah, like Tyrion, he gets close and then doesn't.
Okay, well, either way, that kind of stuff you couldn't get away with in a show, I don't think. That'd be one of those kind of things where it's like, how convenient, So, anything else you want to mention about... I guess that we should mention that Varys turns up.
Yeah.
Tyrion's watching the two guys go off to find Dany, and Varys shows up, and they have a really nice little dialogue about how they're going to kind of manage the city. And then Varys gets a nice line and pretty much says what we're all thinking about these kinds of scenes in general of these two together is, I did miss you.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty apropos.
Which is nice. But also, you understand Varys is a man of means, but how did he just get in there? And how is he going to just also be accepted as part of the inner circle and help run the city? You know what I mean?
Especially considering what Daenerys has mentioned about him multiple times.
Exactly.
Like, the spy master, blah, 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 and the guy who tried to kill me. Although Tyrion did kind of try to pump him up a bit, pump his tires a little. We'll see. I mean, I think we'll just one thing at a time. I think they'll actually make a pretty good pair taking care of Marine. It's like, if only I knew someone who had lots of spies. I like that scene a lot. You forget, we kind of took it for granted because we got some of those scenes early in the season where they're just kind of chatting in their box, and those while they're being carried around, which were actually pretty amazing. But when they were gone, we kind of missed them, and with him back, you got a lot more. You kind of appreciate the Varys and Tyrion dynamic a lot more. So, let's move on to... There's 3 more storylines to cover, 2 big ones and 1 little one. Dany, somewhere in Essos, I guess, still. Honestly, It looks like the Iron Islands almost a little bit, hey? Where she ends up.
It's just sort of like a grassland plateau sort of thing. It doesn't... You don't really know where.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, that's the look I got. I'm like, oh, maybe we're going to get a little tease of the Iron Islands here. We haven't seen that in a long time or whatever. But anyway...
That'd be a lot of flying for him.
Yeah. Well, it seems like she did a lot of flying anyway. Drogon is hanging, just apparently fed himself and is now going to take a nap. And they're in the middle of nowhere, essentially. And I kind of loved seeing Dany trying to get on his back and ended up backwards and then fall off because she's trying to get him to go. It's like trying to get a dog to go for a walk that doesn't want to go for a walk,
Mm-hmm.
Which I thought, again, it was pretty funny. The way that they do the dragon is kind of like a mix between dogs and cats. Sometimes they're very cat-like, other times they're more dog-like, and they're obedience and the way they act. I just like the way that they've decided to emote the dragons. Like how he kind of uses his wing as a blanket to shield his eyes and he goes to sleep. So you gotta wonder here, what's Dany kind of thinking? Why is she just off on a stroll in the middle of nowhere?
Well, she did mention that she needs to eat too, and there's no food there.
Yeah, I guess, but
she can't control Drogon, so she can't make him go get her food. So maybe she's just looking for food, or just getting a bearing on her surroundings, right?
Couldn't you just stand from the top of that plateau and see that there's no food around? That's... No. I don't know. It just seems like it was stick closer to your dragon, so in case you ever get surrounded by thousands of people on horseback, you at least have a chance,
Who came out of nowhere, by the way.
Yeah.
If, like, there's the scene, there's like a pretty, like, a wide shot of her being surrounded, and then there's some CG horsemen coming out, but they're like coming out from behind like rocks. Like it's honestly like it's a video game and they're spawning there.
Yeah, it's like it's a monster closet.
Yeah.
So she sees like Dothraki horsemen. She hears a horse. She sees Dothraki horsemen. You're like, oh, Dothraki. I haven't seen those in a while. And then she takes off her ring and drops it. I guess presumably so that someone can track her or find her. But if you ever drop something in the middle of a field, the chances of ever finding it are like slim to none. Of course, they wouldn't show us her doing that if they weren't going to find it.
So you can expect Jorah and Daario to find it next season.
Right. But it just seems like that's a stretch. I mean, what else is she going to do, I guess? But like the chances that someone would find, or it wouldn't be just trampled and buried into the ground
with
by
all those horses.
Yeah. So anyway, she gets surrounded by like thousands of horseback. I mean, I guess we forgot how big the Dothraki like horde is, and I guess you really can't call something a horde unless there's like thousands of them. So it's fair.
so what this is a different Khalasar, right? Because she was with Khal Drogo. There are other Khalasars. It's unclear in the show whose it is, but she's captured by Dothraki, and who knows what's going to happen.
Well, the Dothraki like to rape people, so I imagine there'll be some raping. Just not to make light of it again, sorry, but like that's probably not what's going to happen. We already know full well that Daenerys doesn't, or the actress who plays Daenerys doesn't even get naked anymore on the show. That's below her pay grade now, so I would be surprised if something like that was going to happen next season, or if she wasn't rescued fairly quickly. I'm not sure what to like as far as predictions for next season on this storyline go. Maybe I don't know. Maybe she's able to convince them to join her fight, although she almost managed to do that last time. So I feel like that's probably unlikely. I'm not sure what's going to happen here. To be honest.
So I mean, I have my own speculations, my own theories. This is also kind of where we leave Daenerys in the 5th book. This is her last chapter. Is she is surrounded by Dothraki.
Okay.
So basically, all the storylines have caught up, more or less. Okay. The way I see it is, I kind of do want her to take over this Khalasar, kill the leaders, they follow the strong, and then she would have that army with her.
How's she going to do that? Drogon?
Well, yeah, exactly. Drogon's going to be the one who's going to come save her.
Okay. I don't know, man. I feel like that's a bit of a stressor. Like that's what I was thinking. I just don't see the logistics of that.
There's
unless
so much
it is Drogon.
In the books. Like there's so much prophecy about to go forward you must go back. Like she has to keep going back to her roots essentially. So she's going to become more of a Targaryen now. It's going to be blood and fire. It's like she's going to be on a rampage. So to go back, she might have to go back to Vaes Dothrak, which is where they would take her anyways. Yeah. I don't know. That's a theory. But I just have a feeling that Daenerys is going to come out of this on top. Like she always seems to fall into a solution that works best for her.
Yeah, don't you always feel like things for her just seem to work out?
Yeah, she's never lifted a sword in her life, but she ends up having like the biggest army. Like she always just ends up like some happy mistake. Now she has the Unsullied wasn't a mistake, but like now she has these ships, or now these sellswords decide to come to her cause, or now these Dothraki are going to follow her. Like she's just going to be amassing this huge army because all of us, book readers and show watchers alike, want her to eventually get to Westeros with a giant army and win, like and take over.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. If we want her to win again, like over everyone else, I just think that that's where the story gets interesting again, is when she finally decides to leave Essos, right? So, is there anything else you want to mention about Dany? I'm kind of this. What do you think about? How about this? What do we think of her storyline this season?
It was very lackluster, I think, this season.
That's pretty much been a pretty common theme for us this whole episode with wrapping up all these storylines, is that not many of them really hit in like a really,
Well, the stuff at the Wall does.
Yes,
and I would say the stuff at King's Landing does.
Yes, well, I mean that's two. You just named two storylines.
The two big ones, though, right? Like this Dany thing, like this entire season, her big coup de grace was last episode where she left out the dragon. This is just a little tease towards next season, right?
Yeah,
this little 5-minute scene doesn't mean anything.
No, it just sets up next season, cliffhanger again, right? But I don't know. Like you're right, the stuff in King's Landing does pay off. The stuff at the Wall does pay off, but like you have to like the stuff at Castle Winterfell doesn't really.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff with Arya doesn't really.
No.
It's okay. It's nothing.
Well,
It's
the stuff
nothing
with Arya
crazy.
isn't exactly a conclusion, right? It feels like they kind of left her story in the middle of it.
Yeah. The stuff with Tyrion, again, kind of feels like the middle of the story, not so much the end of anything.
Up in the air.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess you can't conclude everything at the end of one season, right? So it makes sense. But at the same time, I just feel like this season as a whole maybe wasn't as strong as we hoped. These last 3 episodes, though, probably some of the best episodes.
Absolutely.
On the
8, 9, 10 were huge,
series.
but the rest of the season didn't,
Yeah.
work.
Which was class. Well, not that it didn't work. It's just more. That was more classic. That's more like season 2 Game of Thrones, right? Season 1, season 2, where the first half of 3/4 of the season is a lot of build up.
Yeah.
And to be honest, we appreciate those dialogue scenes, but we appreciate them even more when something actually comes of them, right? So, all right, down to the last 2. We have King's Landing. Cersei's in the black cells. She finally agrees to confess. They've been telling her to confess for episodes now. She's brought before the High Sparrow on her knees and admits to her little thing with Lancel. So it's important to note here that she's still lying about Jaime and the King Robert.
And they really, they didn't even mention anything else about the regicide. Like that, in my mind, would be the most important one, right?
Maybe not in the eyes of the 7, or whatever. Okay, I agree, but that they'll go with what she's admitted to so far, and then go from there. So she's free to go after her atonement. Okay, so that's important. So, just like the High Septon, which you forgot, the High Septon was paraded in the streets naked earlier this season for something similar, not quite the same, but Cersei her hair is cut, she's essentially shaved, very short, as short as you can get with a knife blade, I guess. And she's brought out in rags in front of, I guess, pretty much everyone in King's Landing, just the peasants, right?
Yeah, the commoners.
And she has to make a walk of shame to back to her home at the Red Keep. I love the shot where she looks up and sees the Red Keep in the distance. It really gives you an idea of how far she has to go. Mm-hmm. I think that was really well done.
There's a couple of those where she's halfway and then she looks up and that gets her going again.
Yeah, I mean, so she's then stripped naked and has to walk, right? So we talked about that a little, but I don't know. What do you feel about this whole scene? Was it too much for you? It was a bit much for me, I think. I don't know.
It's pretty gross, all the shit that's happening to her. It's not that she doesn't deserve it. It's that you don't need to linger that long. But it does a good job of, showing how long a walk it is, right? We were really feeling kind of like Cersei towards the end. You just want this to be done and over with. And it was painful towards the end, even though it's Cersei.
Yeah, so I really like Lena Headey's performance. I think it's important to note that that's not Lena Headey in all her glory during this scene. She's actually, it's her face digitally stitched on to a body double for the walk. So it's not actually her naked. Although I didn't notice that. I mean, apparently some people did. I didn't notice. But so
I didn't even think to look for that.
Yeah, so just for those wondering. I liked her performance as much as she could perform with her face. I like she gets halfway, her feet are bloodied, she falls, looks up to see her home is not far, but she's really broken down. She does finish the walk, which is I think important. I don't.
God, they must have paid that body double a lot of money.
You think?
Because I remember saying after the episode, I don't care who you are. If you're an actress and you have to do that, that's not acting. You're going through that shit. People are throwing, even though it's fake shit, it's they're throwing crap at your naked body,
Yeah.
It's tough. That would have been a tough scene to act.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that she has to go through, she's getting stuff thrown at her, people are, flashing her. It's you have the lady with the bell just, walking behind her saying shame, 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 which is, the way she said it, like the exact same way every time, was like really unsettling to me. Did you notice that?
I guess I don't. I hate that lady.
It didn't have like, it also didn't have like a consistent like to me I couldn't find like a consistent pattern. Like she wouldn't say shame 3 times.
Yeah, she was just
ringing it and saying shame.
Yeah, and then sometimes it was a double ring, and then sometimes it was just one ring, and
yeah, maybe they did that on purpose to kind of keep you off balance. I mean, if so, they did a good job with that. But yeah, so I really don't like Cersei. I've been very vocal about how I disliked her as her character through this whole, pretty much ever since the beginning of the show. And at the same time, this is just, kudos to the show for making you feel bad for someone that you've hated for the entire length of the show's run. You can't help but to feel bad for her here, even though at the same time you don't kind of. I mean, it depends on how much you hated Cersei. If you really hated her, maybe you enjoyed watching the scene. It's hard to imagine people enjoyed it.
It's one of those things, like,
it's uncomfortable.
It's so terrible that, like, even if you enjoy it at first, you don't enjoy it by the end. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So do you think she deserved this treatment or this punishment? Is this worthy of the things that she's done? I to some degree, I think this is. I mean,
yeah, I'd say for the most part it is. I think she kind of deserves worse, but like in a different way. Like I don't need to see that happen to her.
Yeah.
I want to see her. You know what? She has lost a lot of and she's gonna find out next season that she lost Myrcella as well. The only thing that keeps Cersei going really is her children. She's not even as much about the Lannister as she is about her children. So it's just Tommen. I don't know. She'll for sure mourn Myrcella, and that will be satisfying to see, honestly.
Yeah. It's important to note that like the prophecy continues to come true about her children.
Well, see, this is the thing. They had that little scene at the beginning of this season, actually, with a young Cersei, and then never really touched upon it again. I don't know if that scene was really enough for us to focus on that prophecy, In Cersei's inner monologue, that's a huge part of her motivation. I thought they were going to go back to it at least like 2 or more times this season to go back and because there's more the witch would say, right?
I guess, but I think if you look at it as a whole, like thematically, the way it opens the season on that scene, and then we end the season, well, not like the final shot, but we end the season with her daughter dying, and then her it's like I think it brings it to mind, to some degree.
I mean, I wasn't thinking that, but if you did, then cool. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. Again, this scene, this whole thing just made me feel uncomfortable. We should mention that she does eventually get to the Red Keep. They open the door and her uncle's there. Maester Pycelle is there, and creepy Maester Qyburn is also there, right? And he helps her, gives her a blanket, and then says he's going to take care of like her feet. And then we find out that the mountain's back, and Jesus, that guy that they have playing the mountain is so
gigantic,
big. Like it is a massive man. He's like from Sweden or something. Is like an impossible name. I think
it's Norway or something, but yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing that's weird though is like Qyburn has no authority to name somebody a Knight of the Kingsguard. That just doesn't make sense. But he said that this is the newest member of the Kingsguard. His name is Sir Robert Strong, and he doesn't speak because he took a vow of silence. Which obviously he doesn't speak because he's a fucking zombie. But so
well, I don't know. I actually kind of believed the vow of silence thing. I didn't know that.
Well, you see his face was all like blue and bloated and.
Yeah, I just didn't believe. There's no reason to believe he could just. That was why he couldn't speak.
I guess, yeah.
Maybe he wasn't a man of many words anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So here's what I take away from the ending here. Okay, other than the fact that there's a zombie version of the mountain, which is terrifying, but that the look on Cersei's face when she's carried away here is not the one of like the scheming, revengeful. Cersei that we've seen. It looked very much resigned. Like, I mean, we use this word resigned, but she seemed like this actually has affected her in some way. I'm not sure what to expect next season. I mean, the classic Cersei thing to do is once she's back there would be to order the Kingsguard to just go and murder all of the
sparrows.
The sparrows. Just go and just kill them all and get rid of this whole problem in the first place. So she doesn't have a trial and all that stuff is done. Right? That would be the classic thing to do, but I don't think for some reason I don't think that's either wouldn't work in this case, or that's not going to happen. I think she's changed in some way here, and I think that when she finds out that Myrcella's dead, it's just going to be compounded that much more. So yeah,
I definitely don't think she's going to lash out, but I'd also like, she won't be a changed woman after this. Like, she's still not evil, but still corrupt Cersei, you know?
Yeah.
I can't imagine this being like, it's not going to turn her into a good person.
No, of course not. I'm not saying that. I just think that maybe she will be changed in some way. You're not going to see her next season walking around with that smirk on her face again, right? That would be a surprise to me, is all.
We'll see. It also kind of depends on what
Tom
is like, you know? We haven't seen Tom in this for a while.
Yeah, like 4 episodes.
And they mentioned that he was like not taking food and just in his room. I want to see what happens when she finally gets to see him again. Mm-hmm. And also, we didn't touch him with Marjorie at all this episode, so what's going on with her?
You imagine she's still just in the...
They're probably going to have a trial as well. I don't know.
I mean, so that's one of those things. So if she does decide to take out the sparrows, right, then she does kind of, like, release Marjorie and Loras. Yeah, so and Renly. So not Renly. Loras, yeah. So yeah, you're not gonna. It's complicated. Again, it's not the same kind of cliffhanger as the other parts of this episode, but it is interesting to see what will happen here next. Just because like the power struggle in King's Landing is a lot different than you'd expect, especially at the beginning of the season. Anything else you want to mention about any predictions you have for King's Landing, anything like that?
Well, like I said, like for the most part, this is caught up with the 5th book, but this is one storyline that hasn't entirely caught up, so I can't really talk too much about King's Landing.
Fair enough. So we'll move on to the final scene for the season. So the scene opens with Jon. He's reading letters that he's received from ravens, presumably about what happened with Stannis. The look on his face is he's not happy about it. They don't tell us, but that's what I'd assume anyway. Ollie enters. He says that there's a wildling who's seen his uncle Benjen. So Benjen Stark you only seen him in the first season, right? Maybe the first episode of the first season. And
he's Ned Stark's younger brother, and he was the first ranger of the Night's Watch at the time.
Yeah, and he went off ranging and was never seen again.
He went off to find Sir Raymar Royce, who was the guy who died in the prologue.
Oh, okay.
So that he was going ranging to try to find that party.
Okay.
And then never came back.
There's theories about Benjen, right? That someone mentioned this to me, and I'm not sure if this is happened in the book. It was just in the book or happened in the show. She was convinced it happened in the show too. But I don't remember that. I feel like I would have. But like this like cloaked figure who like helped Sam at some point. Did this happen in the book?
Yeah, that's in the books, not in the show.
That's not in the show. Okay.
Yeah, his name is Cold Hands, and like nobody knows who he is. He rides on an elk, and it's not really mentioned who he is, but he has extremely cold hands. That's all.
Oh, no way. I guess people's theories are that that's maybe Benjen.
Yeah, that's been theorized. I was kind of leaning towards that too while I was reading the books. The other thing in the show and the books, what happens is the other members of his party come back as whites. So they encountered White Walkers. Now, whether or not Benjen was there is up, nobody knows. Yeah. But he never came back, but his members of his party did.
So they've never seen his body, blah, blah, blah. So
yeah. And also, the show did a great job because they included Benjen in the opening, like the, previously on Game of Thrones, and they reminded everybody of that, which had me thinking, like, oh, maybe we're going to get some news, because it's one of the biggest mysteries in the books is what happened to Benjen Stark. So, like, I wasn't even thinking about what would happen to Jon. I was like, maybe we'll get a little bit of news about Benjen, and I was really amped.
So he comes down the stairs, and he goes into this, like, gloomy, dark corner of Castle Black, and he goes through this group of watchmen, and comes to a sign, and all it says is traitor written on it. And that part, you're kind of like, your heart drops, and you're like, this isn't actually happening. That's really what's happening in my head, is like, what? This isn't actually happening right now. And he turns around, and then there's Alistair Thorne with a knife, and just right in the gut, and he says, for the watch. And then a couple of other dudes stab him. I think 2 others.
2 or 3, and they all say for the watch.
And then he falls to his knees. This is very like drawn out, and the whole time you're like, no, fuck this, no, this is bullshit.
Like, fight back.
Yeah, or something. Like, you can't help but notice like his sword. he leaves it in his office when he goes with him. Because I remember seeing it sitting behind, like leaning against the wall when he's reading those ravens, whatever. And he leaves in such a hurry. He doesn't. And he's in his castle. He doesn't really.
Yeah.
Need
Why would he need it? Yeah.
So yeah. So he's just, I guess, and I don't know. I think he's kind of like shocked, or maybe he isn't because he knows.
No, he is for sure. He's surprised. He can't even comprehend it at first.
Yeah. So then Ollie, of course, comes with the last. He gives the final blow. And that one hurts the most because we know that they've been building up Ollie for something, and unfortunately it was this crap. And Ollie's a show invention, which makes it even worse, I guess. So the final shot of the season lingers on Jon's face as it kind of pulls up very slowly, or does maybe it's just sitting there. Maybe it's not moving. I feel like it's pulling up though. I'm not sure.
It's the blood that's moving.
Yeah, and a pool of blood just kind of like growing around him. So there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, obviously the fact that Jon Snow is dead is a pretty big deal for lots of reasons, story reasons, like personal reasons. Like he was probably my favorite character. He's probably lots of people's favorite character.
He was also like the closest thing we had to a hero at this point, right? Like
yeah, and then it's like the idea that you would build up this character in like this kind of way to have him killed in this like this fucking bullshit way too, like to just be like shanked in an alley essentially, it feels cheap, and it feels like we've been cheated a little. Not to mention these mysteries that we've been wondering about his mother for so long. They'll presumably go unanswered.
Well, no, or we find out, and it's that much more tragic because he never gets to find out, right?
Yeah. So there's certain people out there. I mean, this is one of the so it's weird. So we have Stannis getting killed off screen, leaving questions, right? And then we have Jon being killed on screen, should be leaving no question, but people will do lots of things, mental gymnastics, to justify stuff. So lots of people out there are thinking he's not dead, right? So let's just lay out what certain people are thinking, right? Melisandre is there. This is probably the most common theme of theories. Melisandre arrived at Castle Black like moments before he dies here. The distinction between this and the books is that she's already there, so that it's less obvious, right? That maybe, but the fact that she would be brought back in a way that like to bring it almost more in line with what's happening in the books, in a way that's like not just didn't happen last episode, because then even then you could be like, okay, it's not as obvious, but the fact that it happened this episode, like a couple of scenes before where she returns, right?
Yeah, and she's returning for a reason. Like she's still acting as far as she believes in the name of her god, right?
I suppose. I mean, she did look pretty defeated when
but she's not just running away. Like she has a purpose.
I hope so. So then people bring up the fact that she has actually brought people back from the dead before. So Beric Dondarrion, if you guys remember, he was like season 2.
She never brought him back.
Oh, it was the other. Well,
it was Thoros of Myr, but he was also a priest of R'hllor. Like he had the same power. He's from the same church and all that.
Yeah. So we've seen people brought back from the dead, and not like Drogon, or not what's it? What was it? What was the name of the guy of the Khalasar? What was his name?
Khal Drogo.
Drogo. I was like Drogon. I was like Drogo. I knew the reason his name was Drogon was because he was named after. Yeah. Okay. So Drogo. He was brought back to life with like black magic, but not not in a proper way, right? He left as like a vegetable, right?
Yeah, he was brought back to like he was alive, but it was sort of a waking death.
Yeah. Then we saw in this episode the mountain is brought back to life, but in this case, or maybe he was never fully dead. Not sure. We're not really fully sure, but
yeah,
very much like a classic like Frankenstein monster kind of fashion, right?
Yeah.
Again, not like in the natural sense, but the Beric Dondarrion sense, he was very much still the same person, right?
All that needs to be mentioned is that, again, they didn't do a great job of this in the show. He's brought back, but each time he's brought back, it's harder to accomplish, and each time it takes more out of Thoros. Okay. Like it's more taxing on him. It's not, he can't just snap his fingers and bring him back.
Yeah.
And I think he does, even in the show, mention, I'm not sure how many more times I can do this.
Yeah. So, I mean, the fact that it's happened on the show, that warrants its own thing. The fact that Melisandre, the Red Woman, is there That's important. That's
she's
definitely important.
arguably more powerful than Thoros.
Yes. So it's very difficult, honestly, to try to figure out what's happening here.
Yes.
So let me just, and before we continue with what the different speculation, I just want to mention that, okay, there's 2 interviews that EW does. One, well, they actually more than 2, but 2 that are pertinent to this conversation. Then they do one with DB Weiss and David Benioff, and they do one with Kit Harington. They're both specifically about this scene, and I mentioned that they bring up the fact that with the death of Ned in the first season, and the way that they shot that they didn't want to leave any ambiguity. So they mentioned how in the books you can kind of write around whether it's clear or not whether someone dies, right? It's much more difficult to do that on a show, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to show someone die and you want to leave it ambiguous, it's very difficult, right? It's like, how do you do that? Because is he dead? Because if you show him dying, then he's dead. Because there's like, what little hints are you giving, right? Or in a book, you can there's other ways to do that, internal dialogue, what have you. So they wanted to make it very clear, the showrunners did, that he was dead. That he was dead, and dead. There was no question here. They lingered on his face for 10, 20 seconds of blood just pooling around him like that. There shouldn't be question there, right?
Well, I don't. And the entire time they were lingering on his face, we're listening for his breath. Does it actually cut out or not? I don't know. I think for sure it did, and for sure he's dead. It seemed to be even the lighting on his face got a bit dark, or he got more pale or something. But that might be looking into too much. But
no, I think that they were trying to make it again pretty clear. Kit Harington, as far as he understands, is not back for season 6. Okay, he cut his hair. He's had the same haircut for 5 years. Okay, so he cut his hair right after the interview he did. He went shorter hair. And there was the whole thing about the contracts about having options for different having it an option for 6 seasons and a 7th. At the same time, we also knew they're doing flashbacks. So that doesn't necessarily open up the
door. Did we not get any Tywin flashbacks this season?
We did not. Although
I thought that was promised. I don't know.
I don't remember. I just remember him being. I feel like I remember him being cast. It's all blurred to me now. I'm too traumatized. So the fact that they're making that. Seemingly they're trying to make it very clear that he's dead, and they're not. That even in these interviews, listen, don't expect him to come back next season. But again, this show is all about bucking expectations. So maybe they're going to try to subvert those and say, hey, actually he is coming back. Blah, ta-da, So that's possible.
Yeah, exactly.
But unlikely. I mean, why? If that was the case,
I won't give up hope. But
they would start filming for next season soonish. I mean, not soonish, but
the thing is, if he is in next season, it's going to be impossibly hard for it to be a reveal on the show, right? At some point, there's going to be casting news or set photos or something that's going to reveal it.
No, because Daniel, these sets are not in the middle of the city. This isn't Suicide Squad being filmed in the streets of Toronto.
But they still have fans going and trying to get pictures all the time.
No, I know.
I'm just that news would drop before the show comes out.
I don't know. I think they've done a pretty good job of keeping their secrets secret. Most a lot of the time. The fact is, they're pretty secretive about their sets. They do them in pretty remote locations. It's not easy for people to get on set. Their non-disclosure agreements are pretty ironclad. If you're an extra or if you're another actor on the show, if you release that information, that's fucking bad for you. It's possible to keep that a secret. All right. It seems unlikely. I mean, you can say, well, he cut his hair. You can always give him a wig.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that hard. But I'm not holding out hope, but I am just a smidge. Other theories are that maybe he's dead, right? But maybe Melisandre can use his king quote unquote blood. She did hint at that. There was that weird scene. Remember, he was when they were in the elevator together. Remember that weird one?
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe she can use his his death in some significant way. I'm not sure, right? those are the two theories that come to mind for me.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's anything else that comes to mind.
And I
for
mean,
you.
to be fair, the blood itself was a focal point, so she could just come and like scoop some up, I guess, because that blood is.
Yeah.
If they lingered on the blood pooling around him, right?
Yeah. Okay, I mean, I feel like we read into these things like as much as we possibly can.
Everybody, yeah, I know, it's too much. The only thing I will say, and this is again theoretical, because this is how the 5th book ends with this happening to Jon.
Yeah.
So as far as I know, he is dead. But the fact that Melisandre and Shireen are both still at the wall, I feel like Shireen will be burned, and it'll be her sacrifice to bring Jon back. Would make a bit more sense.
Yeah.
Because she does technically have King's blood. She has nobody left to protect her. And Melisandre has been kind of toying with the idea that Stannis wasn't the chosen one, and she sees something in Jon.
Yeah. So if that happens in the books, that's very interesting, because so far we've had some fairly major diversions, like from the book and the show, obviously with the stuff with Sansa, but it's stuff that's made sense. That's a pretty big difference. Let's say, for instance, if Jon's brought back in the book and not in the show, that's pretty big, right? There's no spoilers, but like they've sort of done that with other characters. There are characters that have come back to life. I know about the Lady Stoneheart thing.
Yes.
But I think that's still a bit different. That's like more of a vengeful spirit than it is so much a person coming back, as far as I understand. So I mean, I've had my ears to the ground here, but I understand that there's a theory that in the books, his wolf is there with him, right? His direwolf is with him at the time when it happens, and that people think that maybe he warged into his, like, that's a theory somehow, that he warged into his direwolf. Although, not that Jon's ever done that. So, but
in the books, he does it.
He has.
In the books he has already, and he's done it not necessarily intentionally, but he has like the sort of wolf dreams that Bran was having.
Oh.
So Bran starts warging, and he starts doing it intentionally. Jon has done it a couple times without even knowing, and then I think maybe like he starts to toy with the idea of it. I can't remember. I have to reread the 5th book, but I don't remember exactly how it goes.
Okay, well, yeah, that's another thing that they obviously left out for the show.
Yes.
But
maybe they left it out for a reason.
Again,
because
making
it has
these,
no effect.
yeah, and making these ambiguous, like, it only, if by leaving those things out, you kind of don't allow for these kinds of speculation, at least for the show. You know, it's like,
yes,
really, the only speculation you have left is Melisandre, because there's really nothing else, at least that the show leaves you anyway.
Yeah.
Or
I mean, like, we know the White Walkers are coming, and they can bring back the dead, but
yeah, but then you don't want to see that.
I know, I don't want to see it. I'm just saying it's out there.
So, is there anything else you'd like to mention about Jon's story this season?
I think out of all the storylines this season, that's been my favorite to follow.
Yeah.
For sure.
It was the most satisfying, at least, as far as payoffs.
I find myself saying this often, and, I sound like a broken record, but, like, it felt very rushed. There's like, the animosity between the Watchmen and the Wildlings, like, that was a slow burn, and there's more than one thing that Jon does. It's not just him going to Hardhome and bringing Wildlings back, which doesn't even happen in the books in that same order. Like, there's a lot of little mini instances that are building up, and then it finally comes to a head when some of the Watchmen decide to betray him, right?
Yeah.
The other thing, again, in the books, Ghost is there, but also that giant is around him when this happens. So they together could fend them off, and maybe he's still alive, but in the show, he's very much obviously dead.
Yeah.
So if they're going in a completely different route that, like you said, is a huge deviation, it's part of them kind of streamlining the show, because they're really focusing on the major storylines and getting rid of all the stuff that in their mind is superfluous, right?
But this is a major storyline. That's why, like, Jon is not just it's not a minor character. This is obviously this is the biggest death since.
But we don't know what happens next, right? So, in terms of how the story progresses after this, if he doesn't have a huge effect on it, like he probably does to a certain degree if he's brought back, they might be just deciding to keep him dead in order to focus on Daenerys, Arya, Sansa, whoever's left, right? Mm-hmm. Or if there's new characters next season too.
Personally, for me, it's really upsetting because I had reached a point with the show where I kind of felt like Jon was pretty safe. Even though in episode 8 I kind of thought maybe he'd get killed by the White Walker, I even in the back of my mind I knew he wasn't going to be. and maybe shame on me for letting myself get to that point, but it's like it's one of those things where you kind of like, why do I put myself through watching this show at all? If like if you're just like gonna take these characters that you actually like, when you kill Jon as like the last hero left in the book, like, or the show, like what are you left with? Like what do you have left to like to care about? Like you don't care what happens to the Watch unless Jon's there. You don't care what happens to like almost anybody, because like you only who are you rooting for now? Sansa, who has no actual agency in anything she actually does, or or Brienne, who no, like you don't care. Maybe like purposely you do, but like it just like it really takes a lot of the emotions out of the show. Like for me, where it's like I didn't cry when I saw Jon die. I felt like cold and like emotionless, and maybe that's what I'm supposed to feel there. But like I feel more betrayed, and I know this has happened on the show before where I felt that way, just specifically with the Red Wedding.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't feel like the right thing to do for the show, right? It does, especially the way they do it, right? I don't know.
This you at least understand why it happened.
To some degree, yeah, I do. I guess.
Like it had sort of been building to this point. It's kind of weird that Alistair Thorne did it. I would never have expected him to do that.
Well, and that and the way that like they set like it's almost one of those like Alistair Thorne had to be there because he's one of the only two recognizable Night's Watchmen that are left on the show.
Yes.
Right? But it's like they did that whole scene where he elected him, First Ranger, right? And all this stuff, like to kind of like build a relationship with him. He has that line about, you have a good heart, Jon Snow, you're going to get us all killed. But that line doesn't necessarily...
There was like a mutual respect between the two of them, right? Like you don't think that he would have done this. And there was nothing in between that to change his mind.
It does seem a little, again, rushed might be the right, you use that word a lot for this season. I don't feel the same way because I don't have the books as context like you do. But yeah, it feels like rushed. They had to jump. The script said so he had to do it. I mean, I understand Ollie, because that actually does build up properly with Ollie why that might happen, but not with Alistair. So, I mean, what's the fallout here for the Wall? Who they elect a new king?
Well, this is interesting, right? Because now we have Melisandre is back at the Wall. Davos, as far as I know, is still at the Wall. Right?
Yeah.
He got back. There's all the rest of the Watch. They're few in number, but they're still there, and it's still their place. And none of them are really. Sam's gone. Aemon's dead. All of Jon's allies are kind of either dead or gone. So we are kind of left with kind of the shittier people at the Watch who don't necessarily believe in the White Walkers, and they care more about the Wildlings. And the Wildlings are also either at the Wall or just south of the Wall.
Yeah.
So you can see the Night's Watch deciding that the war is in the south and going and try to massacre all the Wildlings, and that's just short-sighted, and then the White Walkers coming from behind. Honestly, I have, in terms of the next book or the next season, very bleak outlook. I think it's going to get much darker before it gets any better. The Winds of Winter is the next book, and I think it's going to be a very grim book.
Yeah. I mean, and it mentioned, I guess, that George R. R. Martin has said that he wants to get the book out before next season.
Mm-hmm.
Which
I hope to God that happens.
That would be good. I mean, it would also allow us to continue the dynamic that we have already established for the show, for this podcast anyway. So I'm looking forward to that. Hope for your sake anyway. What do you think of the season as a whole? You say you felt rushed. Anything else you want to mention about the season or this season, particular arc?
I mean, obviously we were very excited going into this season. We're excited going into every Game of Thrones season. It felt like at the first couple episodes, I was like, okay, they're just going to build up to something. It's going to get better. And then episodes 5, 6, 7 were like, hey, it should have moved a bit more by now. There weren't really any big plot movement, oh my God, episodes up until episode 8. Episode 8 was great, and like we said earlier, 8, 9, and 10 were solid. Not even they weren't classic Game of Thrones. They were some of the best that we've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
But before that, the season felt very much like every episode there were scenes that I could tell were just like wasted time or boring or too much focus on this character and no payoff at the end. The Winterfell thing really is really disappointing. Part of it is because it hasn't happened in the books, and now I'm inclined to believe that that's how it's going to play out in the books, that Stannis loses. So
yeah, well, I mean, I give a pretty good idea. That's most likely true.
Exactly. Right? So and same with Shireen dying. Like, she hasn't died yet in the books. I'm sure she's going to, and now I can see how she might be used as a sacrifice, and I hope at least it has that significance. But it's getting to the point where the show is caught up with the books, and now certain things have been not ruined, but like given away. And part of me saying this season it felt so rushed is that I don't feel like I was as emotionally invested in them in the show as I am in the books, and now I don't get that payoff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't have the books for context, and that's kind of why we like doing the show. And I agreed, I guess, after the first season that I was only going to watch the show as a show, at least until the show was over. And I'm sticking to my guns there. But the melancholy ending to this season really puts leaves a sour note for me, because at least even with season 3's Red Wedding, that was episode 9. There was another episode after that that could give you something, right? The final shot of the season is Jon Snow's dead body. I'm not sure if it's I don't know what the right. I can't say I'm not the showrunners here in this case. I don't know what the right or wrong way to do it is, but it feels like it makes you feel really detached, emotionally detached from the show when you end on that note, right? Mm-hmm. Because it leaves you on such a down. Like, compared to last season, what's the last shot in the last season? Is that Arya sailing off on the boat?
It was Arya, yeah, going to Bravos.
That's a pause. That's an uplifting. Like, sailing off into the sunset is an uplifting image, right? Mm-hmm. This is 180 degrees of that. When it's hard to get yourself excited for season 6 when you just like when you feel so low about what's happening.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. Like, right now, looking at season 6, what do we have to look forward to?
That's what I'm saying. Like, when you talk,
Daenerys is captured, Arya's blind, Sansa's jumped off a wall, presumably injured or dead, Jon's dead. Like, what do we care about any of the rest of this, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like what makes the show so exciting are the stakes, right? The stakes are real. Anyone can die at any time, right? That's all fine in practice or in theory, but when that applies to the characters that you like. Yes, we've seen Joffrey die. People didn't like Stannis, whatever, but like when things like the Red Wedding and then this happen, and it applies to those major things more. It feels like that anyway, where like negativity seems to just thrive constantly. Yes. It's like you ask people. I think people ask themselves, like, why am I even watching this show? Because, like, what's the point anymore?
You just have to maintain your hope that it'll get better. There's going to be a happy ending, or not even a happy ending, but it'll get better. The 7th book is called A Dream of Spring, so hopefully it's a bit more positive.
Yeah, well, I didn't know he released the name for it. A Dream of Spring does sound a lot more uplifting.
Yes. And this isn't a spoiler necessarily, but like his working title for that was called a Time for Wolves, and then now he changed it to A Dream of Spring. So you would hope that some of the Starks, whoever are remaining, gets some sort of redemption.
Yeah, if there's any of them left.
Yes. We'll see. Well, maybe it's Rickon. Rickon will come back.
Yeah. Man, I hope we see Rick. I honestly do wish we see Rickon next month.
I think we will.
Next month. Next season. It's a year away. You always have to remind yourself. 10 months. It's 10 months away until the next season of Game of Thrones.
The only other thing, like, Jon, them killing him in episode 10 the way they did at the end, it almost, to me, lends credence to the idea that he's going to come back. Because it's too on the nose. You know, all these episode 9 ones where it was episode 9 and you had that one episode to hope, and then episode 10 was like, yeah, no, they're for real dead.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like they want to be playing with your emotions for an entire year, and then they're going to bring Jon back, and it's supposed to be that much more uplifting.
Yeah.
Potentially.
It does let you kind of like look into, like, now when you get off-season Game of Thrones news, you're going to be looking at it with a different light. Be like, is there hints to Jon's return or blah 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 or whatever? I think it really comes down to the show just killed the most popular character.
Yeah.
I mean, people liked Robb, but he was not the most popular character on the show, right? I mean, Tyrion. People make there's definitely people who can make arguments for Tyrion and for Dany being the most popular.
Those are the big three, yeah.
Yeah, but Jon represented the North and why people like cared about that story. Without Jon, you don't care, and I think they need to figure out if they're not going to bring Jon back. They need to figure out what it is because Sam's not even there anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Well, at this point, without Jon, you don't really care about anything in Westeros other than maybe Sansa.
Yeah.
Right? The Dorne storyline wasn't big enough, and then Tyrion and Dany are in Essos.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes it kind of sound like we're kind of worried about next season, and I think we have good reason to be. I think to some degree.
But I'll still be there day one.
Yeah, I mean, of course. That's like saying, oh, Ant-Man doesn't look that great, but that's like saying, but I'm still gonna go.
We're still gonna go. God damn it.
Yeah. So on that note, just on the same way we opened this episode on a high. Let's on a high. Let's be hopeful
optimistic.
that optimistic, cautiously optimistic, like we are with almost every property that we ever look forward to. Cautiously optimistic that it's going to work out. Things are still going to make sense. To be honest, after the Red Wedding, it was hard to get back into season. It was hard to get into season 4. So let's hope that we don't have that same lull again with season 6. But it's hard to know.
Hope that he releases the next book soon.
Hope. That's all we have now. So until next year, I'm Julian Mush.
And Dan D'Souza.
And we'll be back with season 6, episode 1 in about a year. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter if you want to keep up with it. We'd like to talk about Game of Thrones all year round. Follow us on Twitter at TowerBabbleCast. I just want to mention that we got a lot. I feel like we really gained a little bit of more of a following this season. I really appreciate everyone who's been listening. It's really awesome. Thank you. For those who listen to us as just a Game of Thrones podcast, we'll see you in a year. For those who want to listen to us continue our discussions, not necessarily Game of Thrones related, but we do like to talk about the off-season news a little bit. We do have another podcast, the Tower of Babel podcast. If you're listening to this podcast on just the Game of Thrones feed, there's another one. You'll find the link in the show notes to connect to it on iTunes directly and on what's the other one? Stitcher. Yeah, thank you. So definitely listen to those, and if you've never listened to it, stay tuned after this podcast for a short clip from that show to get an idea of what we do there. Other than that, send us any comments, questions, or anything like that to towerofbabblepodcast@gmail.com. And like I said, we will see you guys in 1 year. This week's Game of Thrones theme cover is an electric cello cover by Tina Guo. You can find her music on YouTube as well as on iTunes. I just want to talk about one last thing before we go, and I maybe should have mentioned it earlier, but Mad Max Fury Road. Did you guys all see that?
Yeah.
Yeah? What do you guys think of Mad Max?
It was fun. Like, I don't know. I think there's this. Everybody's loving that movie so much. I wasn't blown away by it like a lot of people seem to be.
I don't know. I would just say that I don't know how you're not blown away because they pulled off a 2-hour chase scene with the best practical effects.
The practical effects
of CG. Perfectly cohesive. It's crazy. How does that happen in a desert? How can you do that?
I don't know. I found a lot of it to be visually boring at certain points.
What? How is it visually boring? Of all the criticisms to throw at Mad Max Fury Road, visually boring is not the one I thought.
Like, action is cool, but a lot of it, like, I don't know. It was all very much just the same crap happening over and over again.
I guess I thought it was.
It wasn't as revolutionary, and maybe part of it is because I went into it a little late, and I'd seen everybody speaking about it and everybody loving it so much that I was going in expecting more. Maybe that's a piece of it.
Well, I think
But
there's been a little bit of hyperbole. I agree with you there. People have been
for
calling
sure.
it the best action film in the last 20 years. I think
Yeah, like settle down.
It's done some pretty impressive action things that but I don't know if
I
it's the
don't
best
think it's
action
the best
film.
action of all time. I would say 20 years, but it's up there in terms of influencing a lot of things to come.
I
I
mean
think.
you're right about the practical effects, Jeremy. Like the ability that what they did with the effects on this, with like a director, like an 85-year-old director. It's like pretty like the whole thing is pretty crazy. The idea that he's had ideas for this movie in his head for like 40 years to do a new.
And it's a very simple story. It's just how we go through it, and it's just a lot of action. Sure, they're just always in the same setting, but I don't know. I just find myself always just craving more of it, and like I just thought it was so cool the whole time. Like,
See, I found myself. I wanted more the entire time. I wanted more, and I feel like it just never delivered for me.
What I thought the making of this movie is more interesting than the movie itself to me. Like what they did with like people talk about how he cut the movie in a certain way. There is no every scene is center frame, right? So when you cut doing all these different cuts, you never have to search for what's going on. It's always right in the middle of the screen, which I think is like that's so crazy because like there's so many crazy things happening.
Everything is very purposeful. Even the beginning, he's just standing on that hill, and then all of a sudden he just leaves, and then you just see him going down the hill in the distance. You're just there. Then he's gone, and then like a minute passes, and then vroom, vroom, vroom. All these cars just jumping over the same shot. The camera just sitting there. It's like, wow, that's so cool. Like how no one's ever done that in the recent memory in my mind.
No, it's pretty. I don't think
that's
anyone's
like
ever done a
wow.
movie
Like
this.
we're stuck in this moment. And that's exactly what would happen. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just thought it was so immersive when he did that one scene from the beginning.
I love the world that they set up. I mean, the world's been established in other movies, but the way they, like... I never watched any of the other Mad Max movies, right? So going in, I just instantly understood the rules of the world, which is really important when you're doing this kind of movie. The rules are instantly set up, why things are the way they are and how they are. It's, like, never fully explained, but you're kind of, like, okay with that, you know?
Yeah, it doesn't waste too much time on that.
No, I mean, and the Mad Max as a character isn't really even the main character of the movie, which is really cool. It's more Furiosa, who's more the main character, which is really awesome.
That's off the chain events that he kind of flourishes out of, and is part of.
I say they share the spotlight a bit, but like
No, they do, but like she sets the story up. If she doesn't disobey the guy and do whatever, then Mad Max is dead.
Well, no, they always say like some of the criticisms is that Mad Max is literally a passenger in his own movie, which is true
Which is still pretty cool.
But
because any of us can be passengers in anything. It's up to us to make something of it and change something.
So like the idea is that
what
these events would have still happened if Mad Max wasn't there. She still would have kidnapped the girl, or not kidnapped, but like smuggled them out, right? She still would have, like, all those things would have happened regardless of Mad Max's.
But who knows how far she would have gotten.
That's the whole point, is that she wouldn't have gotten as far without him.
He was a stranger, just like any of us could have been in a certain circumstance, and we chose to act and do something about it.
I mean, so I love it for its visuals, its action. Like the music is insane. Like,
the music is
good.
Bad.
It's probably some of the best scores I've heard in a long time. Easily.
Absolutely.
But I mean, I would like a little bit. I do like a little bit more substance to the story. Like the story here is, we go to this place, and we come back when we go back. Like that's the story.
And,
which is
like, I swear to God, there's like maybe 40 lines of dialogue.
maybe
If that.
Yeah, I know. And again, it's
like little things like that. Like
all that stuff didn't bother me because I just didn't need it.
But like that's why you go into, like, Julian, you were saying you like it because of the story behind it, and like that's you can't go into a movie.
Me
thinking
too. I love
things.
stories too, but when I was watching, it's like I didn't need any of it. I just want to see this one
I tried to
one
watch it for what it
situation
was.
unfold. That's all I cared about.
Yeah,
that's
fine.
why I like the movie.
It is. You're right. It's very simple, neat, tight. Yeah, for sure. It works on that level.
It maybe not crave more story. Most movies you need story for sure. I'm saying this movie's successful, and that's why people like it, because that story was not needed for the amount of substance in terms of its action and characterization that it had. That's why it's a success.
I think it's more refreshing than revolutionary. Like
it can't be super revolutionary.
No, but
that's what they're making. You know, that's what I'm saying.
Well, I think it's slightly a bit of both. Like I think movies are going to have to take a hand from now.
Well, I mean, like the fact that they were able to build these characters with what you said, 40 lines of dialogue, you understand what's going on with these characters.
Yeah.
There's no, like, there is still characterization. They still grow throughout the movie. It's just,
it's
just done through action instead of dialogue, which is like, that's impressive, you know? I'm not going to say it's one of the best movies I've seen in 20 years, but it's one of the best action movies I've seen in a long time, for sure. For sure. There's no denying that. But I agree, Dan. There's a bit of hyperbole out there. It seems to be growing. People just are making it out to be more than I think it really is. But maybe rightfully so. I'm not sure.